The Grandmaster attacks with his king. This is just insane. We're going to look at this totally crazy game played by the Indian Grandmaster Inian. He has white and he opens with the pawn queen. He plays d4 and his opponent, the Ukrainian master Mosesov, responds with knight to f6, controlling the e4 square. And so c4 is played, e6, knight c3 to support the e4 push, and bishop b4, the pin. The Indian Grandmaster can't play the e4 pawn, so he settles for the modest e3. b6 is played with the intention, why not, of putting the bishop on b7, double control of the center square, and knight to e2. The bishop is blocked, but the idea might be to attack the bishop on b4 with a 3 and, in case of an exchange, recapture with the knight to preserve the pawn structure. Black plays knight e4, taking immediate advantage to attack the pinned knight, so f3. Knight takes, and black attacks the center with c5. Counter push to d5. The Ukrainian master now plays bishop a6, e4, and takes on d5. And here one could simply recapture with the e-pawn on d5. But Grandmaster Inian is going to recapture with the c-pawn on d5. And it's from this moment on that the game is going to get crazy. Because obviously recapturing with the c-pawn on d5, indeed, it preserves the center. White will have a pawn majority in the center, but it allows bishop takes bishop, and recapturing with either the king or the rook will deprive the king of a potential kingside castling. And in fact, king takes was played. By the way, that unpins the knight. But the king is now deprived of any castling. And this king isn't going to be idle in this game. You'll see. Maybe the Indian Grandmaster Inian will break the record for king moves in a middle game. Kingside castling is played knight to e2. See, we're talking about development. Black has already castled. They've tucked the king away. They have the bishop developed. And white isn't developing and plays the knight to e2. Why? Well, quite simply to neutralize the bishop on b4 a bit. It could even fall victim to a 3. Well, it's true it can retreat to a 5 without facing b4 yet because of the pawn, but you can see how the bishop could still get trapped. And besides, it's now deprived of any captures. As for the knight on e2, it has, on the contrary, many attacking prospects. It can jump to g3, maybe come to f5, getting closer to the rook. We'll see all that. Black plays d6, so knight g3 is played. And you see, if the knight comes to f5, it can pressure the d6 pawn, forcing the queen into a defensive posture and attack the g7 pawn. And maybe the queen could manage to join the knight in the attack on the g7 pawn. And if you're thinking black could play g6, which wasn't played in the game, but look, the variation is instructive. On g6, one can take immediate advantage to play bishop h6, attacking the rook. And besides, black is completely lost now. Look, a3, bishop a5, b4, and on take, bishop takes, queen d4, attack the bishop, threatening mate, black is going to lose a piece. So you see that this arrival of the knight on g3 was ultimately very timely. This knight maneuver from e2 to g3 sidelines the bishop. It can put it in trouble, in respiratory distress, this poor bishop. As for the knight, it can look for the f5 square without fearing g6 because that weakens the h6 square. We could even send the h-pawn to go destroy and open the file for the rook. And ultimately, this knight is going to give black some headaches. So black is going to play c4. It's interesting, huh? c4. The pawn is exposed, it's true, but black for now is still better developed since the king hasn't found shelter, huh? And the bishop can take the c5 square and ultimately embarrass white. Plus, the bishop can defend d6, so if knight f5 arrives, at least the d6 pawn will be defended and the queen can attend to other business. But queen c2 is played, attacking the pawn. Black do not defend, they prefer to develop. Knight d7, queen takes c4, bishop c5. An extra pawn for white, but difficulties for this king with the bishop, which is ultimately not so badly placed. The knight, which could also join the fight. So the queen retreats preventively to c3 and points at g7. A 5 is played. Knight f5, the threat is clear, we're threatening mate. The black knight comes to e5. f4, we want to chase the knight still to mate, but bishop b4, we attack the queen. The queen shifts to g3, still to mate on g7. The knight obstructs the file. h4 is played to destabilize the knight with h5, which is then mated on g7, but the black queen comes to e8, and black threatens to counterattack in the center. Take this pawn on e4, then take the knight, open the e-file, and after all, the king, let's not forget, still has no shelter. And that's why Grandmaster Iossif here prefers to return to d3, protect the e4 pawn so that the center doesn't give way. Black plays h5 because the push to h5 was still a threat, A 3, bishop c5. And there a 3 was played to allow bishop d2 without the bishops being exchanged, and thus be able to put the bishop then on c3 to attack black's kingside castling, the pawn on g7. The knight comes to e7 to try to provoke exchanges, but white is not accommodating. They retreat to g3, they attack the pawn on h5. f5 is played, black opens the center, and that allows the queen to defend h5. And this strike aims to open the E and F files, since the king is still exposed. Rook to e1 to come defend, take on e4, knight takes e4, the queen moves to g6 with this pin. Rook to h3 comes to defend the queen, and sometimes the rook could even come to g3 to go attack the king on the g file, protected by the knight and by the white queen, of course. Knight f5 comes to control this square on g3. Knight g5. A 4 is played. Rook e6, we attack the queen, we exploit the weakness of the square on e6. Rook f6 is played, bishop c3, the bishop moves onto the diagonal, rook takes. We could take back with the knight, but here it's better to take with the pawn to get a passed pawn. Rook 8 comes to attack the pawn. Queen 4 comes to defend. The push to d5. So why the push to d5? Black will want to play knight d4, but they don't want to lose their queen. So they're going to play d5 to deflect the white queen. And now they play knight d4. And you'll tell me, yes, but this knight can be taken, white attacks twice, and black sacrifices a piece. But they do it to get access to the b1 square, attack the white king, and threaten to win back the piece. It doesn't work, but it's still super dangerous. Look, bishop takes, queen b1 check, king e2, queen c2 check, king e1. And yes, because if the king goes to f3, there'll be queen d3 with the fork check, and finally, black will win back the missing piece, still with the attack. So in the position, king e1 was played, queen c1 check, king e2, queen c2 check. And here, the Indian Grandmaster doesn't want the position to repeat, so he goes to e3. But queen c1 check, the king moves up to e4, queen c2 check, the king moves up to e5, right in the center, like I was saying earlier. The bishop goes to e7 with a terrible threat, threatening bishop f6 check, king d6, and rook d8 mate. I'll show you. I know it's white's turn to move, but I'm showing you the threat. So it's bishop f6 check, king d6, rook d8 mate. The rook attacks, the bishop traps, the queen traps, and the king would end up being the most advanced piece, finally, of the white army. That's why in this position, Iossif will move his queen back to e4. He offers a queen trade and will then allow his king to escape to f5, since the black queen will no longer control that square. Black is a piece down, so they don't want to trade queens. They want to take advantage of the king's exposure, and they play queen c7 check. The king goes to f5. Of course, he can't go to d5 because of rook d8 mate. So the king goes to f5, rook f8 check. The knight interposes on f7. The queen goes to c4. Rook e3 is played. King h7, because the white king could also have access to the g6 square, you see. So we deprive the white king of this square, and we're maybe getting ready to play g6, even to attack the king. And here, look, king f5, check. In the end, it's the black king who's under attack. g6. It's amusing, this piece configuration for white here in the center. It looks like a fleur-de-lis or a spade or even maybe a sword. I always like to look at the pictorial side of certain chess positions, certain piece placements. You see, it reminds me of a sword with the tip of the sword and the drop of blood with this knight on f7. The drop of blood on the tip of the blade. It's white to move. They play queen b7, bishop f6 check, king takes, queen takes d4 check. So black sacrificed the bishop to lure the king away from protecting its own bishop on d4. And here the king goes to e7. If the black queen takes on e3, we'll take the rook on f8, And we'll have the most advanced piece in the opponent's camp. It'll be the white king. Incredible, isn't it? So in this position, black prefers to play king g7 to defend the rook. The white rook, which is also under attack, moves to e5. Queen takes b2, queen c7. Queen takes a 3 check. The queen moves back to block, queen c3. The push to f5 to try, well, to get f6, and if taken, well, to take back with the rook and have rook g5. We want to strip the king of the last barricade he might have. The queen goes to c8 with the threat of rook e8 or queen e8 mate. But white will be the first to reach the black king with this push to f6 with check. King g8 and knight d8. Well played. Obviously, if black exchanges everything, they completely lose this endgame. So black prefers to play a3. Rook g5 attacks the pawn on g6. Queen c2 comes to defend. f7 check. And black resigns. We can understand why they resign. They're so besieged in this position, but I'll show you a bit of what could happen. Imagine black doesn't resign and plays king g7. Then there would be queen e5 check. The king now has to leave the rook's protection. King h7. And it's quite funny. It's the king who finally takes the rook and threatens queen g7 mate. Of course, white with 2 extra pieces is totally winning, but I like final mate positions. We can see what that might look like. Imagine black plays queen b2. Now, there's no way to play queen g7 to attack the king because the black queen could take while attacking the white king. So queen g7 is no longer possible, but white can win here. Do you see it? Do you know how? We can mate in 2 moves. So you can pause the video. So obviously the mate isn't by queen g7 since the black queen takes, as we said, but it could be rook takes h5 check. Pawn takes and queen takes mate thanks to the king, depriving the black king of escape squares. Now imagine black plays queen c5, forcing the capture of the black queen because there's a fork there. So queen takes, pawn takes. How could we finish with white? Well, of course, we could finish in a fairly simple way, take the pawn, then get behind the black pawn. But I like the victory with the white king. For example, king e7 to free the pawn. A 2. Now, the black pawn can no longer be caught. But do we make a queen? No, we don't make a queen. We do a knight promotion with check. And the mates will come with the trio of the 2 knights and the rook. For example, if the king goes to h6, rook takes g6 mate right away. If the king goes to g7, we have rook takes g6 check, king h8, knight f7 mate. If the king goes to h8, we'll have knight f7 check. He's forced to come here and rook takes g6 mate. So you see, he can't resist the trio of knight and rook. And besides, this final position with the pawn promotion to a knight is also quite visually interesting. Well, there you go. I hope you enjoyed the video. So don't hesitate to give me a thumbs up, leave comments, share the video, and support the channel. Help me out. You're my community.